All right, glad we could have everyone here for this awesome discussion. I'm going to get started with this webinar now. So I'm Seth, I'm your host with the most. I'm currently a venture partner with Golden Sparrow Ventures, and I've been working in the venture capital and startup space for quite a while now. And I'm joined by two of the most foremost corporate lawyers in our region. And I have their intros here that's filled with amazing accolades and descriptions of their experience, but I think you'll hear it best from them. So Alessandra, can we start with you? You can tell us a little bit about your background, your specific expertise, and and how you're able to stay.
Thank you very much for the invite. Of course, it's a pleasure to be here with you on this Easter Sunday evening. I graduated in Italy, and I was actually planning to start a very traditional national career as a lawyer after failing to become a diplomat, but that's another story. At some point, for a weird coincidence, I was invited to come to Oman for 3 months on an internship. I was young at the time and a bit reckless, so I decided to just go for 3 months, and I never left the region. This was 16 years ago. The following year, in the same law firm where I was working at the time in Muscat, they hired this young Pakistani lawyer called Taimur Malik, and that's how back in 2008 we met. Then we parted, and then we worked together again on 2 occasions. So we have been basically moving from firm to firm in a sort of parallel career in a way. And over time, I ended up specializing in corporate law, a lot of foreign investment, both on the side of the foreign investor and representing Omani companies, government-owned companies, investment funds, and the like. Projects in the most various business sectors, so from tourism to food security, infrastructure, electricity, water, you name it, which also led to a relatively large part of my practice revolving around public tenders, both representing, of course, the client and representing the bidders. This, although my main base has been in Muscat, but more for personal reasons than anything, has led over the years to an expansion of my practice in other Gulf countries, particularly the UAE. I admit it, I'm not a Saudi expert, which is what everybody is looking for these days, but I have experience in the other Gulf countries, which people seem to neglect to some extent right now, because of course the big excitement is in Riyadh and Jeddah.
Yeah.
So I am a frequent visitor to Pakistan, and that's something, that our audience might appreciate. I also never go to Karachi, exactly like, Taimur isn't based there, but we have an office in Islamabad, and I visit quite frequently.
Okay. We're gonna dive deep into your hate for Karachi maybe a little later into this conversation. But Taimur Bhai, we'd love to hear from you as well. Of course, we know you're a mainstay at Bot Launch, you're a partner in the venture as well. But I'd love for you to give us a quick rundown of your specific domain expertise as well.
So thank you very much for this, and Seth, thank you for moderating this. I was called to the bar from LinkedIn in UK, and then I worked in Pakistan till 2008. I was the executive director of the Research Society of International Law in Pakistan as well at that time. And then I worked initially in Oman, then in UAE. Then I worked in-house for the global mining group across the region, Middle East and West Asia. And then I was a partner at a US law firm, Curtis Mallet Provost, and was sort of covering the region for that firm. And then I was a partner at Clyde & Co., another leading global firm, based out of Dubai, but covering the region. And because of Clyde & Co.'s Saudi presence, I was actually fortunate to do a lot of Saudi work. Most people in UAE these days, half the work has been Saudi work.
Yeah.
I am now back in Pakistan full time, but with Alessandra and other colleagues, we do a lot of Middle East based work almost every day. My strength really now, although I've done everything from all this different sectors and sophisticated project areas that Alessandra mentioned, from multi-billion-dollar acquisitions and financings to privatizations and greenfield projects. But now I focus more in my expertise as a business advisor. I like to think of myself as somebody who's legal plus in a way, and wear a commercial hat as well. I have an MBA too. So I focus on advising Pakistani businesses in entering the GCC market and international companies in entering either GCC or Pakistan. So that's
Makes
over
sense.
the years, that's become my sort of expertise. And that support I give to, I wouldn't say early stage startups, but startups with some funding and some traction to the biggest companies in the world that you can think of. So the top Fortune 500 companies are on my client roster. So
Makes sense.
that's what I do. Look forward to this session and the discussion and the questions that the audience may have.
Yes, absolutely. And please, everyone who's watching, please do send us your questions. I personally have a huge bias for regulatory compliance, so I think a lot of my questions will skew that way. And then, of course, the discussion will evolve organically as well, but I want to cover as much as possible if anybody has any burning questions. To start off, I'd like to go to you, Alessandra. In broad strokes, what are the most critical legal risk factors that we need to be keenly aware of as operators from Pakistan going into the GCC region?
Now, the first element here that I would like to underline is that the GCC region is a region, of course, geographically and diplomatically. So the Gulf Cooperation Council is a customs union. It has a certain degree of integration, but do not please imagine it to be something like the European Union. It's 6 countries, and now we will make a list and let's see who remembers them all. So we have, of course, Saudi and the UAE, which are the major ones. And then you have other 4 countries, which are Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Oman. These countries do have a similar legal framework and administrative framework. If you read the doing business guides of the different Gulf countries, you will find similarities. But what I need to stress to everybody is that there are also differences. Things work in very different ways, if not in law from the practical point of view. So there are issues that are dealt with differently. And I'm talking about issues that we all are interested in our daily activities. It can be company or corporation, it can be the local partner, mandatory, yes or no. It can be visas, it can be, and this is my pet peeve in a way, it can be, are we going to be able to obtain investment? Probably yes, because we are a good company, but record and formalize this investment the way we would like to, possibly not. So look up all the different options, which are not only the 6 Gulf countries, but also the various free zones and special economic zones, and do your due diligence. Do not rely entirely on the sales and marketing stuff of this or that free zone. Find out really how things work. It's a system that is different from the common law system that you may be used to, and that poses certain challenges. One is the relative unsophistication of the local commercial companies law, especially when you look at the limited liability company, which is the obvious vehicle that a startup will choose. Also, because you have to understand that joint stock companies, I'm talking private, of course, we are not even getting to the listed ones,
Yes.
in the Gulf are subject to scrutiny, supervision, and formalities that are much, much more stringent than in other jurisdictions. And in my opinion, for no good reason. If the three of us now set up a closed joint stock company in Oman, we would be treated like a listed company in another market. So you are restricted in a way to limited liability companies, and this comes across the jurisdictions with a whole set of issues, which are preemption rights of the other shareholders, which make it difficult to, introduce investors if required. In more than one jurisdiction, you need 100% favorable votes, for example, of all shareholders for a capital increase. It's impossible to dilute someone. And
Right,
these
yeah.
are, sadly, these are realities that companies realize sometimes too late. You have already set up, you have already started your business, you've hired the people, and on hiring the people, another note, before making a choice, think of who you will need to hire, how many, and with what background, because a number of countries in the region do have policies that impose the employment of local employees. And this comes with an entirely different set of issues, but it's not only the local employees. All employees have rights under the labor law in most of these countries that are very different from what you're used to in Pakistan. And I'm talking about hiring and firing, for example. HR is an important function. And it's an important function because it carries liability.
Yes.
So the risks, if we want to call them risks, because these are potential liabilities, are not unknown. They are not unknown. They are actually published, and they can be reviewed and they can be assessed against a business plan, they can be assessed against a financial plan, but they need to be investigated. Do not fall for, a second tier random free zone in the UAE, because it's very, very difficult to then undo what you have done and move. Another thing worth pointing out is that, for example, in the European Union, you can transfer companies from one country to the other. It's allowed.
Yes.
You can't do this in the Gulf.
Yeah.
You have to close down, liquidate, open elsewhere, and restart from zero. So I think the first real task of a startup wishing to explore the possibility of setting up in the Gulf is to really understand what they need and what jurisdiction, what free zone, what special economic zone works best for their needs. It's not easy. I mean, for example, in Saudi, well, okay, I do not personally work much, but I follow what happens. We could give you or procure information today that I am pretty sure in 6 months will be outdated.
Yes.
Because things there are changing at incredible speed right now. At the same time, the other Gulf countries also change. Over time, some want to encourage investment, some others are worried about the explosion of foreign residents. So they all have different needs that lead to changes. And part of the problem, and one of the reasons why it's crucial to speak to others who are actually working there in addition to advisors, and that's my opinion, is that many of these changes are not published. You go to a ministry to file an application for a transaction, and 2 weeks earlier, it went through and everything was fine. Suddenly, you're not allowed to do it anymore, or the documents you present are no longer adequate. So it's complicated. It's interesting. It's exciting. It's mostly still tax-free, not everywhere. I'm sure you know that Dubai has introduced a corporate tax, but you
That's right.
also know that compared to tax levels in other countries of the world, it's actually very small. But you know,
Absolutely.
nobody knows whether it will increase. Now they took this first big step. The first big step, it's like VAT. VAT was recently introduced across the Gulf. Some countries introduced it earlier, others introduced it later. It's at 5%. That's all very good. But the real step there was to introduce it. Once it's there, to increase it, it's a very, very simple operation. You don't need to change the infrastructure. So these are all considerations that need to be made, in my opinion.
Makes sense. Thank you, Alessandra. Taimur Bhai, would you add anything to that in terms of just broad legal risk factors in GCC?
So it was, I think, a very broad overview that Alessandra kindly provided. I would just add that she mentioned a very important thing, that don't fall in the trap of registering a company in any random free zone in the region.
Yeah.
Whether it's in UAE or in any other country.
Anywhere.
You have to be really, anyways, you have to be really careful in where you incorporate and for what reason. It's always, I like to, convey this to startup founders all the time, or businessmen generally, that it's easy to set up a company and also not that expensive perhaps, but it's cumbersome and expensive to close down a company, even if it's a shell company that you never really used. So I think that's the first takeaway, that don't just go ahead and register in a random free zone. Take your time, assess properly what works for you, at least in the medium term, and register accordingly. We still see a norm that many companies in GCC or international companies are subsidiaries of foreign holdcos. So for all the reasons that Alessandra mentioned, you will still see companies incorporated in the Western world, which then have companies in the UAE, in Oman, and Saudi, and so on, as subsidiaries, operational subsidiaries. And then all the investment and shareholding issues are at the holdco, topco level abroad. Now, the exception to that at the moment in the region, the best exception would be DIFC companies, Dubai International Financial Center, holdco structures. In Qatar, Qatar Financial Center also provides a similar model. And now Abu Dhabi Global Market, ADGM, also provides a clean English law type of holdco arrangement. So
they cost more, but
they cost more, but they're worth it.
But it's worth every rupee you spend, because you have a reliable legal framework.
Absolutely.
You have the option to pick your articles of association. You have a stable system. You have courts, because one element I might have forgotten to mention, Taimur, is that sometimes there are issues that need to be solved, and it happens, and then you have the local court system, which may not always be up to the expectations of a foreign investor. So if you set up in the DIFC and you happen to have an internal disagreement, I'm not talking about, debt recoveries and the like. I'm talking about substantial issues, company investor or the like, to be entirely honest with you, rather than entrusting this to a Saudi court or a Kuwaiti court, being in the DIFC gives you a much more reliable framework for this aspect of your company life as well.
I was going to ask you guys this question anyway, because the holdco situation, I mean, in Pakistan, I'm not really sure why, but the most common or the most popular destination is Singapore. And of course, right now, I mean, a lot of it is because of the movement in Saudi or the liquidity in Saudi, but just generally the interest in doing business in GCC is very high. And so a lot of these Pakistani founders are trying to migrate their business there while still having that holdco in Singapore. Is it in my best interest as a founder to instead have my holdco in DIFC or ADGM from day one instead of Singapore? Is that more beneficial to me, do you think?
If I may, I don't think it's now any longer correct that most Pakistani holdcos are business holdcos are in Singapore. I think a
Really?
lot of them are in Delaware.
Oh, yes.
Many of them now are also ADGM or DIFC. Singapore, Pakistani founders have had challenges in opening bank accounts of their companies, in other issues as well. And then because of the travel restrictions during COVID and post-COVID, Singapore's charm as a holdco destination has reduced a bit.
Okay.
So do keep that in mind. Delaware is still, I would say, the most likely holdco jurisdiction. Now, when you're talking about Saudi operations, now Saudi wants companies to incorporate directly there in most cases. So they want the Saudi element and the Saudi play. Saudi, although they'll never say, but may not like DIFC or ADGM holdcos the most.
But they don't have a common law zone of their own, right?
They don't have a common law zone, so what do you do?
No.
So, I mean, of course, DIFC, ADGM companies are setting up their subsidiaries in Saudi as we speak. But Saudi is going to go into a similar direction as well and create its own zone of that sort.
Look, it's not even a matter of common law and civil law. It's a matter of quality. I know that, you are common law creatures. I'm both, because I'm both Italian qualified and I'm a solicitor.
Right.
But if you look at civil law jurisdictions such as Luxembourg or Switzerland, they are excellent countries to incorporate companies. The problem in the Gulf is not whether it's common law or civil law, it's the sophistication of their legal system, which is still lacking.
Developing, evolving. If I can just
the optimist and the realist.
Yeah. So if I can still pick up some of the questions. One question is, how do you compare different GCC countries in terms of ease of doing business from a legal perspective? My view, Alessandra, is that UAE is probably still the best in the GCC region. In terms of ease of doing business. I would say Oman is a close second, and I say that because Oman may not have many free zones of the sort that UAE does, but Oman now, since I think in recent years, allows 100% foreign ownership of a company. And it's fairly straightforward and easy to register. So a local mainland company which can do most activities that are permissible can be 100% foreign owned with foreign directors, and the incorporation cost isn't cost prohibitive, and it can be registered fairly quickly as well. So very interestingly, we'll see sometimes now companies even coming from Europe and elsewhere setting up their Middle East base in a country like Oman and having a mainland Omani company, LLC, and then using it as a GCC base. So, but not many people know about this Omani jurisdiction play.
Oman is not good at marketing.
Oman is not good at marketing, but it is ease of doing business is certainly there. And
it's much easier. It's much easier to register a mainland company in Oman than to register a free zone company in Dubai. Say if you wanted to register a sole proprietor company in Oman now, after this meeting, I can get you to sign 5 pieces of paper that I can put together very, very quickly. And in 3-4 days, you have your commercial registration certificate for $200. But Oman is not good at advertising it. And it has the usual issues that relate to company structure. So maximum number of shareholders, preemption rights, 100% approval for increase or reduction of share capital, etc., etc., etc. So it's not ideal either, but it's easy.
I'll pick that point further. Look, one of the things that Alessandra has mentioned is preemption rights and why it's important. Look, most startups or technology sector companies would go around and sign safe notes, right?
Yes.
So simple agreements for future equity, assuming that the company which is signing the safe note will actually then be able to issue shares if the conversion event takes place.
One would hope so.
What Alessandra is saying that it may not happen that easily, because the structure, the legal structures across the GCC, not in any one particular country, but across the GCC, are not really ready as yet to allow those kind of instruments to work. With the exception, of course, I'm saying that it may be a bit easier at DIFC, holdco structures, and so on. But mainland companies and most free zone companies, even in UAE, will not allow those things to work. I mean, that can still be in contractual undertaking, which the company and its shareholders undertake to somehow implement. But it's not in the way that it can get implemented in Delaware or Singapore. So something to keep in mind for people, because I know many of our friends either sign it as a company, or we have friends as investors there who sign it as investors. So you're not really fully protected. Keep that in mind.
Makes sense. Let's move on to this other point of local partners, whether they're local individuals or entities. There's a lot of misinformation around this topic. How important is this in 2024? And let's start with Saudi, because again, a lot of the information isn't readily available or accessible. If I need to incorporate, do I still need a local partner?
I think it's becoming less and less of a requirement across the GCC. Alessandra is specialist at this. But as I said, in Oman, even a mainland company can be registered with 100% foreign shareholding. In UAE as well, that's possible.
They mean the UAE.
In the UAE as well, it's possible. But you still have to have a business plan, commitments to do sizable business and all that. Not if you're just registering a small SME. So, but they're getting there. Saudi is also beginning to allow that. Now, the thing is, it's less of a legal requirement now, and it's more of a cultural, local business requirement at times. So most clients that we speak with want to bring on local groups or local shareholders because of the strategic value and strength that they give to the new business in the country. Alessandra, would that be right? I mean, your thoughts on this?
Yes. Look, it is fading away, in my opinion, in the UAE. It is fading away certainly in Oman, because people are getting used to all these 100% foreign-owned companies. But everywhere else, there is still always the question, oh, your company, who is your local partner? Can we speak to your local? No, there is this administrative hurdle to be resolved at the Ministry of Labor or at the police. Send your local partner. So I think it's still quite deeply ingrained in the local mentality, if not in the local law. Now, Saudi is a slightly different case, because they are opening up now. Come on, we couldn't even properly travel to Saudi until fairly recently. And I feel that it is still in a way required, even if not for all sectors from a legal point of view, but from an administrative point of view, because it's a never-changing landscape. It's a place that is still difficult to navigate. In the other countries, it also really depends on what someone is doing, to be honest with you, because one of the magic roles of this mythological creature called the local sponsor was to open doors for government tenders and large contracts. That's not what a startup ordinarily looks for. The average startup is not here to participate in a tender to build the new airport. They are managing their own business. So that's another way to look at what contribution a local partner may give, or whether he adds any value.
I would also, Seth, if you may allow me, answer a question somebody had asked, and people keep asking that what does it take to close down a company in the GCC?
Oof.
So
Yeah.
very quickly, look, incorporation, you all know what's required for incorporation, the usual documentation that you submit, you put in the share capital and so on. To close down a company, apart from resolutions of the company and the shareholders, you need to have up-to-date audited accounts. You need to obtain NOCs from the taxation department, from the relevant manpower or human resources department or ministry in the country, from the local municipality, and so on. You need various NOCs from government departments. You need to then appoint a liquidator if it's voluntary liquidation, close down a company, who has to prepare a report, has to publish notices in newspapers for creditors to see and submit any claims. So that process really goes on at least a year in most cases.
Yes.
And because it involves the appointment of auditors, lawyers, liquidator, publication in newspapers and so on, is expensive and time-consuming. So this is even for a company which has done very little. But then you need to get rid of the company or you want to close it down for whatever reason. You need to keep a certain budget to do that. So therefore, think very carefully. And then there is a question I saw that when is a good time to incorporate a business in Saudi? I'm already running a business in Pakistan. The cost is 30,000 USD or thereabouts, and takes 6 months. So that's right. I mean, in Saudi, you're lucky if you are able to register a company for $30,000, right? So by the time most people end up registering a company in Saudi, even if the initial quote, let's say from the lawyers, is $25,000, with all the other ingredients added in and costs added in, it's more like 40 to 50,000 USD to register a company in Saudi at the moment, which is at least twice of the cost that we'll pay elsewhere in the GCC, if not more. So
no, for sure.
So absolutely, please.
And when you look at costs, look at all the costs. The UAE, they are masters in this because they will give you a company registration for a relatively limited amount of money. But by the time you start looking into the mandatory PO box to receive, your post, the mandatory flexi desk to get one visa, the mandatory bigger flexi desk or flexi office because you need more than one visa, the cost of the visas, the medical, the IDs, the driving licenses, etc., it all adds up. And it's something that one needs to calculate because it might really throw your initial business plan and financial planning completely out of balance.
Absolutely.
Please,
I'm sorry, there's a lot of questions here that
which is good, which is great. I mean, we're here to answer the questions. So
no, I had missed them. I didn't realize my chat was open, so I wasn't getting the pop-up. But we're going to do a rapid fire now and go through these. And whoever can would like to take this. Best option for Holdco, BVI, Delaware, or DIFC? I think DIFC, but
well, DIFC, if your business is entirely region focused, GCC focused and thereabouts. If you're more international, then Delaware may still make the most sense. With a subsidiary holdco, a regional holdco in the region, perhaps in DIFC. So your top co can still be in Delaware or somewhere else. But if you are a regional play and plus Pakistan, Bangladesh, Egypt, etc., then DIFC certainly, or ADGM for that matter.
Don't forget Africa. Don't forget Africa.
Of course, DIFC,
Africa is in Dubai. The big players are moving from relatively dangerous cities with issues with infrastructure, with internet, which is, what they really need. They are moving to Dubai.
And by the way,
it's easier to fly from Dubai to all of the African capitals than to fly from one African capital to the other.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And by the way, I mean, like I have myself for clients registered DIFC structures for cement factories, for mines, for power projects in Africa. So for trading business, large trading business in Africa. So yeah, absolutely. Include all of Africa, perhaps slightly with the exception of the Francophone Africa, but generally most of Africa, is something that can be covered through DIFC or ADGM.
And to Talal, who has asked this question, I would also add that most US investors specifically will prefer Delaware for, again, that safe note issue. Okay, if someone wants to expand to the MENA region, sorry.
Please, no, so I think that's another key point. Apart from where your business is focused, where are your investors from? If you're targeting Middle Eastern investors, then of course the Middle Eastern holdco will work perfectly for them. They may actually not be too comfortable or familiar with US structures, may not want to expose themselves to US investment. So you have to think about those things. But if you have international investors, then again, I would still go for something like with Delaware entities.
Yeah, agreed. Next question is, if someone wants to expand to MENA, what's the best country for them? I think we already answered this in terms of ease of doing business. In the last few years, Pakistani founders have had challenges opening up holdcos or bank accounts in the UAE due to KYC issues. Do you think this will change soon?
I don't even know. I think
no.
KYC, know your business, know your customer, of course. So it was.
Yeah, but I didn't know that Pakistanis were failing KYC.
So there were two reasons. One, Pakistan was on the FATF Financial Action Task Force grade list.
So what's UAE?
So that's what I'm saying. And the second reason was that it was UAE was also on the list. So they had more compliance requirements, especially for citizens of other countries on the FATF grade list. Now Pakistan is no longer on the FATF grey list. UAE is no longer on the FATF grey list. So I expect things to improve. But the compliance structures that have been put in place generally vis-a-vis Pakistani shareholders are there. So it does take somewhat time, but that's why you need to work with the professional consultants in, let's say in Dubai, who will already know bankers and these key banks and will put you in touch so things move a bit more smoothly.
Absolutely. Okay, makes sense. How do you see, I think this is for you, Alessandra, how do you see Oman as a business/startup hub in the next 5 years?
Fantastic question. The number of 100% foreign-owned companies here is increasing, month by month. But I still don't believe that tech startups are the right business to be headquartered in Oman for the reasons we discussed. But it also really depends on how they are going to be structured and where they are going to work. If no sophisticated investment is required, and therefore, there is no need to make sure that convertible notes will promptly be enforced, if there is no need to have different classes of shares, because all these things don't truly work, then it's an easy jurisdiction. Things are relatively straightforward, but one has to just think about how the company is going to grow.
Yeah, I will just add to this that look, Oman was one of the first countries in the region to set up a technology fund through its sovereign wealth fund. Something that both Alessandra and I
had them as an investor.
Yes,
we worked for Oman Technology Fund for many years. And that was one of the challenges. You see, sadly, quite a few successful Omani startups ended up relocating to the UAE, because with the exception of Oman Technology Fund, which is local and therefore used to the, to the legal framework that we have, other investors just couldn't deal with the simple LLC. Things have slightly improved with the new commercial companies law that was issued in 2019. But still one needs to be very aware of what can and cannot be done in an efficient manner.
Alessandra, if I can add to this, I would say that if you are a technology company, because I've had those discussions with many technology sector services companies, and you're looking for a jurisdiction where your senior staff or even your technology team wants a safe, secure environment, to be based out
Oh, yes.
of, wants stable electricity and, high and stable broadband connections at a relatively reasonable cost, then Oman is a perfect jurisdiction. So if you
Absolutely.
want to, have part of your team based out of there and service the Western world or even Saudi and whatnot, then it's a great jurisdiction because it's
Yeah.
cheaper than
Makes sense.
UAE and Saudi and whatnot, and has all the advantages. I think
Makes
there's lots
sense.
of questions. So, Saif, I mean,
Yeah, no, it's okay. We touched upon this earlier, but there's a more direct question on this topic now, that processes in the KSA are very opaque. And so how do you
Mhm.
recommend founders research on these for clarity? Because again, a lot of that information is not readily available. So is the only way to go about this is to hire a local firm, or what do we do?
well, I think more than just a local firm. As you enter any jurisdiction, you need to do doing business in that country, market entry, questionnaire, which may include
Yeah.
legal questions, tax questions, VAT now issues, employment related issues, customs, the clearance issues, and so on. So you really probably need to have a couple of different consultants. You'll be very lucky to have a one-stop shop service,
Yeah.
and really invest on getting that right. So if you're
Yeah.
cutting corners on that cost, you are going to have to pay for that
Yeah.
later on in your business life cycle.
But they're more like
you-
NISA or any of these ministries don't have any single hub for
No,
resources? No.
they do, but honestly, they are not reliable.
Yeah.
And
And
they
also
are
they, so
not
they,
good
they,
at
they provide general information.
updating. Yeah,
general
they are
information,
not good at updating information, and they have a large number, and I'm talking about all the local countries, a large
Yeah.
number of unwritten policies, not
Yes, you
that's our policy, but it's not
Yeah.
written anywhere,
Yeah.
and it's really, really hard to know and to find out unless you speak to
Yeah.
somebody who works there and does this day in and day out.
Yeah. Less
So
of a policy, more of a bias. Yeah.
yeah,
I'm
do
used to that.
not rely entirely on corporate services providers.
Yeah.
They are just selling you a service, which is somehow to put together a company for you. But
Of course.
you need to, they are the other face of the salespersons of the free zones.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely.
You
I want to
need
jump to this
really
next question though, really quickly, because we've got a lot, and I'm mindful of our time. As a dual Canadian Pakistani citizen, I want to expand to the Middle East. I believe U.S. taxation is very restrictive. Should I still set up my holdco in Delaware? Again, I think
Well,
this
if
is
you're
answered by where your
if
investors
you're
coming from
investor, yeah, and where the client's based, right? So
and where the client is.
yeah,
Where
I
are
mean,
you based?
and
Where
are
is
you
I think
based?
everybody
this person is based in Pakistan, but I think they're more concerned about their exposure to taxation in Canada as a Canadian citizen. But
That's a tax question, but I would say that, look, you have all the options available to you or people like
Yeah.
you. But Delaware structure would still work if you have international investors and international clients.
Yeah.
If you're going
Okay,
to be
we have
focused
more.
on GCC, then go for GCC.
Don't
Yeah, we
forget
have.
that occasionally in the Gulf, they will summon you in person.
Yeah.
Everybody advertises how everything is online. It isn't. Every now and then you will have to appear personally somewhere to get something done. And this means that if you're based in Canada, it might be complicated.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have a more technical question. I like this one. It's spicy. So if a Pakistani startup registers a Delaware company, I think they mean a Delaware holdco, and then registers an opco in Dubai, I'm assuming, can the Dubai company sign a service agreement with its American counterpart to manage the dilution issue?
Well, I mean, in some ways, yes, but it's the thing to keep in mind is that it's the Dubai entity is just an opco which is owned by the Delaware entity. So the Dubai entity shareholding is not changing. It's a fully owned subsidiary of the Delaware entity, and hence all the shareholding related issues and dilution will take place at the Delaware level anyway. So
True.
nothing is changing at the Dubai OpCo level, except that the Dubai OpCo will now need to, like Pakistani companies do as well, submit ultimate beneficial ownership UBO forms to the relevant company registrars of free zone and so on from time to time, in which you will have to tell if significant dilution has taken place at the parent company level in Delaware. But yes, I mean, look, most opcos of the large global startups in Dubai or Saudi, Oman or Qatar, they are not dealing with the investment or dilution issues locally, right? Even if they are. So I represented a large Saudi investor which invested in a partly Pakistani origin unicorn in the region, right? A few $100 million, and everything was being done at a different level, right? And that's true across the startup spectrum. Unless again, it's a DIFC structure, which still has some challenges even compared to Delaware structures.
No, I think we all agree that Delaware is optimal for most reasons. What if we register a company in the neighboring country and do business in KSA? Do we get some special treatment for being registered in GCC compared to a non-GCC registered company?
Well, one short answer would be yes. You're better off being a GCC company entering Saudi than, let's say, a Pakistani or Indian or Bangladeshi company trying to enter Saudi. So if you end up setting up a base somewhere in the Middle East region and then enter Saudi, you're one step closer to achieving your objectives. And it's not just for Pakistani companies. It's I mean, international European companies would do the same, right? If they have a foot in the door in the GCC, they'll use that to enter Saudi.
Makes sense.
And there are a lot of GCC level agreements between the GCC countries. So you benefit from them if you're a GCC player entering the market. So you have to keep that in mind.
Does Saudi have the most agreements with UAE? Most cooperation with the UAE out of the others of the six?
No, the treaties and the agreements all involve all 6 countries. The GCC is a union, so whatever agreement in order to come into force has to be signed by all 6 countries. Then, of course, there are nations within the GCC that are historical closer to each other compared to others. You will remember the whole Qatar drama that happened a few years ago, and how, the whole GCC was split basically in 3 parts. Qatar on one side, Saudi and Emirates and Bahrain on the other, and Kuwait and Oman neutral. But the GCC survived this after 2 years. It ended in the same abrupt way it started, and GCC continues.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Alessandra, could you give us an estimate of the total cost of incorporating in Dubai? And I know it's going to be different. I know, exactly. I know it's going to be different.
And incorporating what? That's the question.
This
and incorporating with whom?
I would say it would range from $10,000 to, let's say, $30,000 or $40,000 from a relatively low cost free zone like Sharjah or Ras Al Khaimah to DIFC or ADGM. That's going to be the range. Really. And also, in each free zone, there are different types of company. Do you want to set up a company with only 2 visas? You want to set up a company that has all the flexibility in the world to do business. So there are more than 24 free zones in UAE. Each has its own rules and procedures and fees.
Because some are for specific business sectors. And therefore, you have, the health city and the internet city and the this city and the that city. Then every emirate wanted at least one. And by the way, if anyone is interested, outside Dubai, I would leave alone the Northern Emirates, but a relatively decent middle ground is Ras Al Khaimah, in my opinion. Compared to the other, let's call them minor free zones, they are relatively well organized. So everybody wanted one, plus they wanted all these special ones, and the one in Jebel Ali for the port, and the MCC for the commodities. And suddenly you have 25 to 30 free zones, each one with its own price list. It's a menu. It's an enormous menu with hundreds of combinations. I agree with Taimur's estimate, but please be aware that in this estimate, you don't have a lawyer doing the work for you.
I think excellent point. I would further add that UAE is different from the other GCC countries in the sense that UAE has a few different emirates in UAE. So if you're planning to do business beyond, let's say, Dubai, across UAE, you will have to deal with local emirate issues as well. And you will have certain different licensing requirements in Al Ain, in Sharjah, in Ras Al Khaimah, in Abu Dhabi, and so on. So that's something else to keep in mind. There are national federal laws, but then there are emirate-specific regulations as well that are important. Another question that was interesting and is relevant is that, challenges that foreign businesses face in relation to emiratization. But that can be Omanization, that can be Saudization, because all of these GCC countries also have now local employee protection schemes. So you need to have certain number of employees, certain types of employees from the local community. Now, the challenge obviously is that, you can't, in most cases, the hiring and firing situation regarding local employees is slightly different. And they can tend to be litigious. So whereas the foreign employee can go away, the local may drag you through courts, even if they don't really have a claim. So you have to be prepared for that, and handling even local employee labor cases can cost money because the legal support in the Middle East and court system is not cheap. It's not Pakistan, right? So it's not the US or UK, but it's not Pakistan. So you still have to spend tens of thousands of dollars in fighting these kind of cases.
Employees are heavily protected, so they will not pay court fees. If an employee sues you, you company pay the court fees and all the relating fees. And the courts are extremely sympathetic to employees. So that's one of the risks that need to be taken into account. The rights apply to everyone. Foreign employees have exactly the same right to sue a company that local employees do. But of course, foreign employees, might just decide to leave. The locals will stay and they will file a complaint.
They will drag it out. Yeah, makes sense. For both of you, which GCC country has the best IP law protection?
Well, I think
there is now a framework that applies across the GCC. So the debate, there is, and they start to implementing framework laws. And one of the debates, because I was doing a research for a client last week, is to what extent local laws still apply or prevail. So it's maturing. I think it's relatively well evolved. The GCC countries tend to be members of the various conventions on IP rights, the major conventions. The systems are by now integrated. You can do a Romarin trademark search. You can claim priority. You can deal with it as if, as in most more sophisticated jurisdictions. There was a progress from this point of view.
That's very interesting.
Another thing to have to keep in mind, like IP, is data protection. So data protection laws are now kicking in across GCC. Some countries have them, some countries have draft laws, which will be enacted soon. And that's important because most startups will be dealing with data, right? So whether in the form
who's leading the charge?
Customers,
who's leading the charge with best data protections right now?
Best, who knows? UAE is the only one that has a proper one that is enforced now.
But most of it is based on GDPR, the
Yes.
European standard, because
Yeah.
they want to be able, GCC companies to be able to do business or deal with data of
Yeah,
European
of course.
customers or
Right.
counterparts. And that by necessity means that you need to have the basic GDPR sort of structure in your law and your jurisdiction as well. So,
Of course.
that's the reason. So as long as if you are GDPR compliant, then you should be compliant in most of the GCC countries as well eventually. But that's something to keep in mind, because those regulations are coming in. DIFC has data protection, has had data protection for some time now, and requires data protection officer appointment by each company and so on.
Yeah.
And others are going to follow suit.
In Oman, the executive regulations were issued in February, so last month, and they will come into force in February 2025.
Okay.
Because of
Wonderful.
course, these you see, these law and these regulations are not an improvement on a previous system. They are something completely new. So
Right.
every single company in the country will have to adapt and
Yeah.
adopt these rules. And slowly, they are popping up everywhere. I guess that dealing internationally with, particularly with Western countries, is becoming very difficult for countries that don't have any form of data protection.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Alessandra, we have another specialist Oman question for you.
Oh.
Can a startup begin with an SPC rather than an LLC before raising funds just to test the market?
Of course. An SPC is simply an LLC with one shareholder. And the process to convert, if you can call it conversion, as an SPC into an LLC is very simply a share transfer whereby one or more new shareholders are introduced in the company.
Okay,
So
interesting.
I agree.
Easy.
So you recommend it
And
if someone was...
to test
Yes.
it, yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
to test it, absolutely. The foreign company or the foreign investor can set up a 100% own SPC and then, maybe start with some relatively simple investment with actual shares in the company being sold to investors. And that's a very, very simple way to start.
Okay, interesting.
Steph, there was another very interesting question that, do founders need to have Dubai driver's license and live in Dubai? Can they be living in the US? The answer is you don't really need a Dubai driving license. You can use Uber or Careem there, and or elsewhere in the GCC. You don't need to live full time in Dubai or Saudi for that matter. At one point, I think both Alessandra and I have had multiple residence visas across GCC countries, and naturally, we're not living in all of them.
Every 6 months,
Yeah,
you need to enter,
yes, so
because otherwise you will
you
lose
need
your
to,
residency.
Of course, of course.
right?
We have
Again, that flexibility is there, please.
Yeah, no, thank you for clarifying that, Tim. About Saudi, this might be a little controversial. Can Saudi partners push foreign owners out of their business on a whim? Is this a myth or a reality?
I believe,
Well, I think,
because, please, you. I
No,
believe
I
that
think
it dates back, to the time when it was very difficult, nearly impossible for a foreigner to set up a company in these countries. You must have heard this about any country in the Gulf. And suddenly the money sponsor kicked me out and took everything that was mine. But what they neglect to say is that back in the days, it was very, very difficult to have mixed companies with foreign investments, and even more so 100% foreign-owned companies. So what these companies effectively were this very dangerous concept of the Saudi or Omani or Emirati owns 100% of the company, but I call it mine and I manage the business. Of course, this has been a recipe for disaster on many occasions. Later on, they introduced the 4951 model, which was an improvement, but also not ideal because the foreign partner was always minority. So they couldn't really kick you out outright, but they could, influence the
involvement.
business dramatically.
There is a question that can you register a business in Oman for $200? I would like to simply say that, look, you can't register a company anywhere in the GCC for less than, $5,000 to $10,000 minimum.
No,
Right?
no, no,
Because you
stop.
have
In
to,
Oman,
no,
technically,
you have to
you
cover
can,
but you
the
have to cover
fees
the legal
payable to
fees.
the ministry are 200 riyal.
Yeah.
But then, of course, you have a number of other expenses because you need an office, which can be a serviced office. And you can't just, use the address of your lawyer or corporate services provider. You need your own office with your own lease, and you need your municipality license, and you need a visa. So all in all, you will end up spending $10,000 in the first year. But the registration per se, if it's all you need really for whatever reason, is indeed approximately $200. You can't run the business on top of that, though.
Yeah, but don't think of opening a company anywhere in the GCC if you only want to spend $200 or $500, right?
Yeah.
You will end up creating a cost base for yourself anyway, which you don't anticipate at the moment. So
Exactly.
$10,000 minimum is the cost that you should have in mind if you're thinking of setting up a company in anywhere in the GCC.
Taimur bhai, we have another good question here. I don't know what you think. Holdco versus opco, chicken or egg? What do you think needs to come first? Does this founder need to decide their holdco location first? Or can they just start with an opco in Pakistan or an opco in Dubai and then migrate to a holdco structure later on?
Well, you can, but the challenge is that if you have money from investors and your own business capital at the opco level in Pakistan or GCC, then how are you going to take it to the holdco unless you raise new
Exactly.
funds? So
Yeah.
because of that, primarily because of that reason, your holdco comes first so that your
Yes.
structure flows well. Having said that, for practical reasons, and I'm a true believer in the lean startup model. I love that book and that methodology that
Absolutely.
you should really focus on the product, the market, and all of that,
Yes.
and other things can come. But whatever you do at that stage, you should be clear in terms of what are your legal risks and how you're going to cover them. So if you
Yes.
set up first in Pakistan or the GCC, that's fine. But then don't end up creating too many shareholders at the Pakistan or UAE level. Keep it simple with the objective that as soon as you clear where your investors are coming from, which markets you're going to target, you create a holdco structure where you move all your shareholders. And then you can keep, you can transfer the shares from the current shareholder to the holdco. Again, it's easier in the GCC, a bit more difficult in Pakistan because if you have to do that, you need state bank approvals and certain other requirements kick in, which are not there in most cases in the GCC if you have a opco there. So there you
Makes
can
sense.
do share transfer to the holdco. But good
No,
question.
that's enlightening for me as well. Next question is, which zone in the UAE provides best ease of business for warehousing and e-commerce, especially for global shipping? Now, would it be Commerce City, or do you think it would be DAFSA, or I don't know?
It'll most probably be Jafza or
Jabal
Dafza.
Ali, yeah.
Or
Jabal
the
Ali.
Dubai airports or Jabal Ali airports. Jabal Ali is by far the most is the largest, I would say.
Okay.
So
And
Jabal
easy to
Ali free
operate.
zone. Well, I mean, look, they're all, as Alessandra said earlier, everything is marketed to be online, but in reality, in many of these cases, you actually need to physically go and pursue your applications if you want to change anything. We need to send our people or the clients to go there, sign things in front of their
Of
officials,
course.
and request copies. So be prepared to have some on-ground presence when you're doing this kind of business. It can't all be done remotely.
But
Agreed.
Jebel Ali is a mature free zone. You see,
The
another
mature free.
element I believe that is important to look at is free zones that have many companies, company clients, let's call them, and that have a bit of history, that have been in operation for the past, let's say, at least 10 years. Those give you much better guarantees than these new free zones that pop up every now and then in the minor Emirates, and
Yeah.
that perhaps have, 4 or 5 Indian companies or Chinese small, sort of dragon market style companies housed there. Those I would not necessarily consider.
One thing I
No,
would like to say, Saif, is that look, Pakistani startups or regional startups should look at at what the US or European startups have done. They will
which
keep a
is,
certain part of their startup budget for advisory costs, right?
yeah,
I don't think and view that Pakistani startups certainly don't view it that way.
no, they
Their
don't.
legal accounting tax budget is a minuscule percentage, a micro percentage of their budget. That's the wrong approach, right?
Agreed.
So I think that needs to change. Middle East, we are already seeing that the Middle East-based startups are approaching it differently, also because many of their founders are from the Western jurisdictions who come with a mindset that you need to use a lawyer for every contract, or
You have to.
a proper tax advisor and so on. So
Agreed.
I would say that that's a challenge we face. If you're not paying quality buck for your consultant's time, of course, you're not getting, detailed or quality input. So
Absolutely.
you need to keep that in mind and make it a part of your initial business cost and ongoing business cost.
Agreed. We're very much over time, so thank you both so much for this. I know I learned a lot, and I hope that our listeners did as well. I think we should do another legal workshop, maybe specifically on UA zones, because there's so many questions pertaining to that topic specifically. But anyway, thank you for everybody else who joined as well. Thank you for the questions. Can we have WhatsApp and email of the speakers? Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm on the group. LinkedIn, you can add me on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
I will drop my email.
LinkedIn would be the best, but of course you can share our emails as well, and so certainly.
Absolutely. Thank you, Taimur. Thank you, Alessandra.
Thank you
Happy
very
Easter
much.
once again.
Thank you, Saif.
Thank you,
Bye.
Have a
Saif.
good trip.
Thank you,
Bye.
Ali,
All right,
for
good.
organizing this as well. Really appreciate
Thank you
it.
to Ali. Ali is the real rock star. Thank you to Ali.
Is that
Always.
okay? Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.